7:14 in the morning on Tuesday, November 8th, 2011. A meter reader named Dale Coleman was working a southbound spur through the Kellam Industrial Corridor when he stopped walking. There, between two railroad ties, sat a single brown leather boot, upright, laces double knotted, no foot inside. Coleman looked down the track in both directions. Nothing. He knelt and looked closer. The boot had not been thrown or dropped. The iron oxide dust on the tie beneath it showed no compression mark, no sign of force, no sign of anyone placing it there with weight. It had simply landed, sole down, and stayed. That detail would take investigators 2 years to fully explain. What it would eventually point toward was something far older than one missing woman in Portsville, Ohio. Erin Mueller had not come home in 6 days. Erin Mueller was 44 years old and lived in the Millgate neighborhood of Portsville, Ohio, a mid-sized industrial city where the freight economy had been quietly contracting for 20 years. The old rail corridors still cut through the city's eastern edge, lined by warehouses and switching yards that ran at a fraction of their former volume. Most people in Portsville drove past those corridors without thinking about them. Erin walked past one of them every morning. For 9 years, she had been a floor supervisor at Brightway Linen, a commercial laundry service that supplied hotels and medical facilities across 3 counties. Her co-workers described her as methodical and fair, the kind of manager who remembered birthdays and stayed late when a run fell behind. She had held the floor supervisor role longer than anyone expected, not because she lacked ambition, but because she was genuinely good at it, and the company knew it. She was a mother of 2. Her children were teenagers when she disappeared. Her mornings followed a shape so consistent that her sister Patrice could recite it from memory. Erin left her house by 6:10. She walked a fixed route through Millgate, across 2 side streets, and onto the Seneca Avenue pedestrian bridge. Over the freight access channel, at the midpoint of that bridge, she always stopped. 2 minutes, roughly, she looked out over the water or the tracks below, depending on the season and the light. Her sister described it as the only 2 minutes of the day that belonged entirely to her, before the shift, before the demands, before everyone else's problems became hers. After the bridge, she walked another 4 blocks north to the Brightway Linen facility and started her day. She had done this for years. She was not a person who disappeared. On the morning of November 2nd, 2011, Erin Mueller left her house at her usual time. Cow workers confirmed she did not arrive for her shift. By the afternoon, calls went unanswered. By evening, her children had not heard from her. Her sister Patrice filed a missing persons report on November 6th, 4 days later, a delay that investigators later noted reflected how difficult it is, in the early hours of an absence, to believe the worst about a familiar routine. Portsville Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit was small. 4 detectives, a lieutenant, and a caseload that rarely included homicide. Detective John Patterson, 51 years old and 23 years on the force, was assigned the Mueller case within 48 hours of the report. Patterson was known inside the department for following soft leads longer than most detectives considered worthwhile, a habit that some colleagues found inefficient and that would, in this case, make all the difference. He began with the road. Walking it himself that first week, Patterson noted the bridge stop, the freight corridor below, and the access road that ran parallel to the southbound spur through Kellam. He noted how isolated the corridor felt from the street, how completely invisible it was from the nearest residential block. He noted that the only people with regular legitimate access to that stretch at 6 in the morning would be rail workers, utility readers, and freight contractors. He filed that observation and kept walking. 6 days after Erin was reported missing, and 8 days after Dale Coleman found the boot. Missing and 8 days after Dale Coleman found the boot, a Portsville PD patrol unit located a body in a drainage culvert beneath the rail access road, 200 yards south of a warehouse locally known as Warehouse 7. The identification was made quickly. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. The body had been moved after death. The boot found on the tracks 8 days earlier belonged to Erin Mueller. Patterson stood at the culvert site and looked south down the corridor. He already had one fact that didn't fit. The boot had been upright, laces tied, on an active spur. No one had called it in as evidence of anything. No one, at that point, had connected it to a missing woman from Millgate. It had just sat there for 8 days, in plain sight, holding a question nobody thought to ask. Hushed, he started asking it now. The search warrant executed on November 22nd, 2011, turned up 5 items. Not a cache, not a trove. 5 things, each one ordinary, until you placed it next to the others. In the equipment bay of Earl Roberts' service van, a coil of nylon rope, not unusual for a repair contractor to carry rope. What was unusual was its type, tightly braided, the kind sold at marine supply stores, not the fraying utility cord you'd find in a toolbox. Patterson photographed it and kept moving. Tucked into the seam of the rear cargo mat, a silver hoop earring, small, unremarkable, the kind of thing that could have fallen from a shelf or been tracked in on a shoe. Lab results would take weeks. Patterson bagged it. In Roberts' wallet, an expired employee ID card from Lakeview Rail. Roberts had left Lakeview Rail in 2002, 9 years before the warrant. The ID was worn at the edges, as if it had been handled regularly. Patterson noted the employee number printed across the bottom and kept it. In the cargo area, trace fibers, lab analysis would later match them to the fleece jacket Erin Mueller had been wearing on November 2nd, and in Roberts' garage, a partial container of hydraulic fluid, locomotive braking formulation, the same kind you'd find in an engine room or near an idling freight locomotive, the same kind that had been identified on the sole of Erin Mueller's boot. 5 items, each one defensible in isolation. Together, they described a geometry. Patterson requested the Lakeview Rail personnel file the same week. What he found there did not make the front page, but it stayed with him for years afterward. Between 2001 and 2002, multiple female employees had submitted internal complaints against Roberts. The documented complaints described following behavior and unwanted contact. Lakeview Rail's Human Resources Department had processed the paperwork, circulated internal memos, and done nothing actionable. In late 2002, Roberts resigned. The company described the separation as mutual and declined to say more. The complaints stayed in the file. The file stayed in a cabinet. The file stayed in a cabinet. Roberts had 11 years on the freight corridor between Portsville and Galt Junction. That number held still while Patterson pulled the overnight run logs. Roberts had logged 41 overnight runs during his final 3 years at Lakeview Rail. Most were routine, annotated with standard maintenance codes and fuel stops. But on November 14th, 2001, there was an entry that read differently. The log notation said, "Mechanical delay, unscheduled overnight. Stop, Holden Falls switching yard." The notation was in Roberts' handwriting. The date matched exactly. Lynette Garber, 39 years old, from Holden Falls, had been reported missing on November 14th, 2001. Patterson set that page aside and kept reading. November 9th, 2002, Pam Schuster, 47, of Galt Junction, reported missing. Roberts resigned from Lakeview Rail 10 days later. Partial remains recovered from a drainage channel near Galt Junction Freight Terminal the following spring. The case had remained officially unsolved. Patterson had 3 dates, 3 women, and a logbook that placed the same man on the same corridor on 2 of those dates. The 3rd, November 2nd, 2011, Roberts had already placed himself near the rail corridor voluntarily. He had admitted to a second encounter with Erin Mueller that morning. He said she was alive when he left. The lab returned results on the silver hoop earring in January 2012. DNA confirmed it had belonged to Lynette Garber. The earring had been in Roberts's van for a decade. There is a moment in most investigations where the evidence stops accumulating and starts speaking. For Patterson, that moment arrived not in the lab, not at a crime scene, but at a conference table in the Lakeview Rail regional office, looking at a stack of logbooks that Roberts himself had filled out. The employee number on the expired ID in Roberts's wallet was the same number he had used to check out those logs for overnight runs. Roberts had kept the ID long after he left the company. He had kept it in his wallet. He had handled it often enough to wear the edges. That was not a man who had moved on. Connie Marsh came forward in February 2012. She was 46 years old and lived in Galt Junction. She told investigators that in the fall of 2001, a freight conductor had stopped near a grocery store adjacent to the terminal and offered to help with her stalled car. The offer felt wrong. She had left without accepting it, circled the block, come back. The man was gone. She had thought about it periodically for 10 years, the way you think about something that almost happened. When Roberts' photograph appeared in a Galt Junction newspaper after the indictment, she recognized him. She identified him in a photo array administered by Detective Sandra Pruitt. The defense would later argue the identification was prejudiced by press coverage. The judge allowed it. Connie Marsh had been standing 30 feet from Earl Roberts in the fall of 2001. She had felt something was wrong and acted on it. She was the only woman in the record who had. The grand jury returned an indictment in March 2012. 3 counts, first-degree murder. Roberts maintained that he had not killed anyone. He admitted the second encounter with Erin on November 2nd. He said she had been alive. He said nothing else. Patterson kept photocopied pages of the logbooks at home. After he retired in 2015, he said the judge's sentencing remark had stayed with him. The observation that the logs suggested Roberts had been operational for at least a decade and that the full scope might never be known. That phrase, might never be known, it described the edges of the case exactly. Picture the southbound freight corridor at 5:30 in the morning. Dark, no foot traffic, one access road running parallel to the spur. A woman on a daily walking route crosses a bridge a quarter-mile north. A service van with valid credentials sits in a repair bay. 2 blocks from a starting point, the case against Roberts rested on that convergence and on the question of how it had been arranged. One version of events holds that Roberts encountered Erin Mueller opportunistically, that his presence in the corridor on November 2nd followed from legitimate work, that the encounter was unplanned, and that what happened was impulsive. Roberts himself had admitted to a second meeting near the corridor. Under this reading, the nylon rope and the logbook entries and the earring are evidence of a pattern that preceded Erin, but that Erin's case was not specifically prepared for. But that version collapses the moment you look at October 28th. 5 days before Erin disappeared, Roberts had been on site at Brightway Linen for a scheduled equipment repair. The repair was completed. He stayed an additional 45 minutes. His explanation was a dead battery. His co-worker, Megan Potts, had seen him waiting. Brightway Linen was Erin's workplace. Erin had worked there for 9 years as a floor supervisor. Her routine was regular, her route consistent, her bridge stop a daily fixture at 6:15 in the morning. Roberts had been inside her building 5 days earlier, with no documented reason to stay. The second version, and the one the jury found credible after 11 hours, is that the encounter was not opportunistic at all. Roberts had identified Erin's routine during his time on site at Brightway. He had returned to the corridor on November 2nd, knowing when and where she would be. The attempted staging of a train strike, placing the boot on the spur so that a passing locomotive might destroy forensic evidence, was consistent with someone who had thought beyond the act itself. The boot was the clearest evidence of this. It had been placed on the tracks with the intention that a train would hit it or hit whatever was nearby. Instead, the boot had landed sole down on a tie spike and balanced. It had stood there upright for 8 days, looking deliberate, looking almost like a signal. Forensics confirmed it was not. It was an accident of physics, a staged disappearance that did not quite work. The logbooks connected Roberts to 2 additional corridors, 2 additional Novembers, 2 additional women who had been reported missing while his train sat on a spur nearby. Lynette Garber's earring had survived a decade inside the seam of a cargo mat. Pam Schuster's partial remains had been found near a drainage channel on Roberts's route. 3 women, 3 Novembers, 1 man with a logbook that recorded where he had been and a wallet that held a credential he should have returned. Years before, the jury deliberated for 11 hours and came back with 3 counts. Roberts said nothing at sentencing. The judge noted that the logbooks might describe a decade of activity the indictment had not charged, and that the full scope of what Earl Roberts had done on those overnight runs might never be fully known. Lynette Garber has never been found. The conviction came in September of 2013. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Earl Roberts stood at sentencing and said nothing. His attorney had argued throughout the trial that the logbook entries proved only that Roberts had been in the vicinity of 2 disappearances, not that he had caused them. The defense maintained that Roberts's account of a second, brief encounter with Erin Mueller on November 2nd was consistent with innocence. The jury had 11 hours to weigh that argument against fiber evidence, a decade-old earring and a boot found standing in a rail corridor where Roberts had no documented reason to be. They came back with 3 counts. The judge, reading into the record at sentencing, paused on the logbooks. The notation system Roberts had used was Federal Rail format, precise, time-stamped, official. 41 overnight runs in his final 3 years at Lakeview Rail alone. The judge noted that the pattern the logbooks described suggested Roberts had been operational for at least a decade, possibly longer, and that the indictment had charged only what the physical evidence could support. The full scope of what those overnight runs had covered might never be fully known. Roberts has not spoken publicly since. Lakeview Rail, which had documented internal complaints about Roberts in 2002 and described his departure as mutual, declined to comment on the verdict. The paperwork from those complaints, the reports filed by female employees describing being followed, being watched, had sat unacted for years before the arrest. Detective John Patterson noted in interviews after the trial that those unresolved files had stayed with him through the entire investigation. He could not stop thinking about what a different outcome might have looked like if that paperwork had moved. Patterson retired from the Portsville Police Department in 2015. He kept photocopied pages from the logbooks at home. The cases of Lynette Garber and Pam Schuster, both officially unsolved, at the time of Roberts' arrest were resolved in the indictment. Pam Schuster's partial remains, recovered from the drainage channel near the Gold Junction Freight Terminal in the spring of 2003, had gone unconnected for nearly a decade. Connie Marsh, who had encountered a conductor near that same terminal in the fall of 2001, identified Roberts from a photo array administered by Detective Sandra Pruitt. Her account had remained fragmentary for years. A man who offered to help, a feeling she could not name, a decision to leave. The identification placed Roberts' face in that corridor at the right time. Lynette Garber's body has never been found. Her family has known since the DNA result from the Silver Hoop hearing that she was in Roberts' van. The science answered one question and left another completely open. Where Lynette Garber is, the record does not say. Roberts has not said either. Erin Mueller got up every morning at 5:50. She walked the same route because it was hers. The 2 minutes she spent at the midpoint of the Seneca Avenue bridge, looking at the water standing still before the day started, were 2 minutes that belonged entirely to her. She had worked the same floor supervisor job at Brightway Linen for 9 years. Her sister Patrice knew her well enough to know that 4 days of silence was 4 days too many. Patrice filed the missing persons report on November 6th. The investigation that followed took 2 years to reach a verdict. There is something this case keeps returning to, and it is not the boot or the logbooks or the earring, though all of those matter. It is the distance between what institutions knew and what they did with it. Lakeview Rail had documentation. The complaints were real. The women who filed them were believed enough to be recorded, and then not believed enough to change anything. Roberts resigned. The paperwork stayed in a drawer. 11 years passed. That gap is not a mystery. It is a failure with a paper trail. What the evidence established across 2 years of investigation and 11 hours of jury deliberation is that Earl Roberts moved through a professional infrastructure that gave him access, cover, and routes. The overnight runs were legitimate work. The logbook was a required document. The Lakeview Rail credential in his wallet was expired, but it still opened doors. Every element of how he operated was borrowed from something ordinary. Patrice Mueller has said publicly that she wants people to remember Erin as a person, not as a case, a woman who walked a bridge every morning because the water was quiet, a floor supervisor who had held the same job for 9 years because she was good at it, a mother of 2 who double-knotted her laces and left the house at 6:15. The boot stood upright between the rail ties for 8 days because of an accident of physics. It looked like a signal. It was not, but it was the thing that did not vanish. The thing that stayed visible long enough for Dale Coleman to find it on the morning of November 8, and for the question of how it got there to survive long enough to reach John Patterson's desk. Sometimes a case turns on evidence that was never meant to be found. Sometimes what breaks it open is the one thing that failed to disappear. Lynette Garber's family is still waiting. This show is made by Obermedia.